My name is Jeremy Walton, and I'm finally going to answer the question, does size really matter? Let's go! Sensor size. Does sensor size really matter? Is probably a better way to put it, and if we're going to talk about it, let's compare a full frame sensor to a micro four thirds. I'm going to keep it to the basics and not get into crop factor, image quality, low light, things like that. This is going to be for someone looking to purchase a camera in the mirrorless world and just wants some opinions or thoughts on the topic. I'll cover a few of the important things to take into consideration, but ultimately the choice is yours and it's up to you as a filmmaker to make that choice. Just for some clarification, I'm not bashing on micro four thirds. I've been using it for years. What you're watching now is on my GH5S, and my GH5 has been with me for many adventures, traveling across the United States, and as a hybrid camera has taken plenty of photos that I love. I just think with my experience and what I'm shooting with now may give you a unique perspective to help you make a decision. Let me show you really quick the actual sensors we'll be discussing. Right here is the GH5 with the micro four thirds sensor. We're not necessarily discussing it, but for comparison, here's the RED Komodo with the Super 35 sensor. And finally, here is the Canon R3 with its full frame sensor. To clear all that up, micro four thirds, small. Super 35, bigger. Full frame, big. Speaking of size, to start everything off, we need to get a little physical. To elaborate, let's look at the R3 and GH5 side by side with the lens. Visually, it's a pretty big difference when it comes to size, but is it a big enough difference to sway you to buy one or the other? The GH5 is at 1.59 pounds or 725 grams, including battery and memory. The R3 is at 2.2 pounds or 1,015 grams, which also includes the battery and memory. That's a difference of 0.61 pounds, so a little over half a pound. In my experience, that's nothing when it comes to gear. I think your lenses will make more of a difference, but between primes, zooms, new or vintage, there's a lot of possibilities, so that's for another video. Now, if you're like me doing client work, you're going to be traveling and you need to put all that gear in a camera bag, whether it's a short distance or across the United States. This right here is my camera backpack of choice, the Tenba Axis 24 liter. If you want to know why I use this, I have a video, Don't Waste Your Money, choosing a camera backpack, to see why I love this bag. I bring this bag up for a couple reasons. In here I had 2 of my micro four thirds cameras, 3 lenses, and a bunch of miscellaneous stuff, from really important things like memory cards to snacks. If we want to talk about size and weight, that can mean different things. We can see the actual weight isn't a huge difference, but can add up when multiplying what you have. Then we have the actual difference in size, regardless of what the weight is. I now have the R3 and Komodo in this bag with 2 to 3 lenses, which takes up a lot more room. So, people tend to go with micro four thirds to save space. Here's the problem. Whether I'm shooting full frame or micro four thirds, this backpack is completely full. Look at it this way. When you go on vacation, how many times have you partially packed your suitcase? If you have the room, you throw in another pair of shoes, shirts, whatever. The same happens with my camera bag. If I have the room, it's going to get filled. If you have to pack less because of your full frame equipment, you'll make it work. I've always been able to fit what I need, and most of the time I'm traveling with another bag under the plane or in my car if it's client work, because a camera bag isn't enough. For what I use when traveling with equipment, I have a video, Protect Your Camera Gear, Tenba Attache 3220, which has taken a beating and it really proved the Tenba Tough motto. The other small detail that I want to mention that surprised me is the feel of the bigger camera in my hand. This just seems a tad small, even though it's a solid build. Full frame feels like the right size, from the buttons to the screen. It feels like I have more control over everything. Even the grip makes a difference. The GH5 doesn't sit nicely in my hand. When I'm doing a lot of handheld or just walking through the airport, I basically have to pinch the camera to hold it, which actually gets tiring. I rarely use camera straps. On the other hand, the R3 grip fits nicely in my hand. And not that I recommend holding it this way, but I can effortlessly dangle the grip on my fingers. Just another thing to consider. The next topic that everyone will be discussing if you're trying to decide between full frame and micro four thirds is going to be the price. Even though this comes up all the time, there's not much to talk about. In filmmaking, money will play a big part when purchasing equipment. It's pretty simple. The more money you have, the more things you can buy. We all know that, but what I really mean is you have to decide what your budget is. We can debate all day on what sensor size you should buy, but if you have a limited budget, that might make it an easy decision. That goes for all equipment: tripods, lights, lenses. If you want bigger, stronger, faster, better stuff, it usually costs more. If it's a matter of budget, that's up to you. If we're just looking at price between full frame and micro four thirds, you might be surprised that the difference between something like the Panasonic GH6 and the Canon R6 is only a few $100s, but the features or what you get for that price will be different. Some of those features you might want, some you might need. That's for another video, but getting into full frame isn't necessarily extremely more expensive. If you have some wiggle room, there are some things to consider which might cost you more in the long run, so stick around and I'll get to that in a bit. I think one of the most important and overlooked topics when we're talking sensor size is the long-term investment. This is something you really need to consider. Buying a camera and lenses is a big investment, no matter what sensor size you go with, so you want to make that purchase count. What I've done and what people I know have done when they move up in their career, decide to make an upgrade, or think they've outgrown their current gear, tend to move towards cameras with bigger sensors or cinema cameras ranging from something like RED's lineup or even an Alexa. Now, I'm not saying no one ever downgrades from full frame or Super 35 to micro four thirds, but I think it's safe to say it's not the majority. When it comes to film and television, you don't see micro four thirds. I'm sure it's been done as a crash cam or something similar, but again, look at the majority. That should count for something. If you want some more information, I did do a video on what cameras match RED and ARRI, if you want to see what full frame camera gets used a lot in Hollywood. When you look at the new RED cameras like the Komodo and Raptor, they went with the Canon RF mount. I know I didn't want to get into lenses, but knowing the lenses you buy now can natively work on a camera you might own or rent later on could be a good selling point. Plus, the new RF lenses are new. The Canon EF lenses have been around for a while, so I don't think investing in RF glass would be a bad decision. What you want to try and avoid is buying something now in the short term to save money, but having to spend even more later on. Purchasing the right gear now might be a bigger investment up front, but will save you money down the line. I was lucky enough to pay off my gear pretty quickly and got years out of my micro four thirds gear, and I'm still using it. Eventually everything will change over in this room, but I have the GH5S dialed in, so it's not ready to go just yet. I know where I'm headed, I needed an upgrade, and looking to the future, these cameras and lenses made sense. I will do a more in-depth video about my R3 and Komodo choice, so keep an eye out for that. At the time, the GH5 had some great features that not a lot of cameras had. Fast forward a few years and now we have so many options. I personally think full frame is a good choice, but if you see how technology works, there's going to be a point when everything you want will be in a full frame camera. Some people say micro four thirds is dead already. If not now, what about in 2 years, 3 years? You don't have to listen to me or anyone else, but it is something to consider when looking to the future. As you can see, this choice isn't the easiest to make. There's a lot more variables to consider within these camera setups and even your career as a filmmaker, which can affect your choices, but I figured this would be a good starting point. I don't want to say one is better than the other. You can probably guess based on my purchases what I think, but my situation may be completely different than yours. And that's why, as a filmmaker, you need to make your own choices. Well, there you have it. Does size really matter? Hope you enjoyed the video. Hit that like button because there's definitely more on the way. Subscribe so you don't miss out. Leave a comment if you want to. Until next time, it's a wrap.